My name is Jaya Aysola. I went to multiple universities. I got my anthropology degree at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and then I got my medical degree at University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. And then after my residency training in internal medicine and pediatrics, I went and got a diploma of tropical medicine and hygiene at the London School of Tropical Medicine in London, England. And then several years later, I got my master's in public health at the Harvard School of Public Health in healthcare management and policy. Currently, I'm an associate professor of medicine and of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm the founding executive director of Penn Medicine Center for Health Equity Advancement and former inaugural assistant dean for inclusion, diversity, and equity.
Okay. And then how did you get interested in research in the first place?
So, in undergrad, I majored in anthropology and the social sciences. And back when I went to undergrad, this was 1992 to 1996, a long time ago. I definitely was interested and I was pre med, but my exposure to research in undergrad was more around laboratory or scientific bench research or clinical bedside translational research. And I did both of those when I was an undergraduate. And I thought after both those experiences, I'm definitely not interested in research, is what I thought. And so I graduated with an anthropology degree. I studied the problems with the race concept as my honors thesis. I went to med school and largely forgot about research or thought I was not going to do it. Thereafter, in medical school, I was very interested in primary care and also care delivery in resource constrained areas. I was always interested in, as an anthropologist, as medicine as a social construct, race as a social construct, and social constructs in general. But those sorts of inquiries were like largely replaced by just, getting my medical degree and then becoming trained in and becoming boarded in internal medicine and in pediatrics, my specialties in medicine. But even throughout med school, I did do international work. And then right after residency, I ended up going to the London School of Tropical Medicine because I was very, very interested in care delivery in resource constrained settings. And then I started to work internationally in several countries, Cambodia, Thailand, India, and then domestically after Hurricane Katrina in post-storm New Orleans on care delivery models and designing care delivery models. And I think it was my New Orleans experiences designing care delivery models where it forever changed my trajectory. I started to unearth the challenges of designing care delivery models in resource constrained areas, but in a resource rich environment. And so, what does that mean? Like, some of the countries that we're going to were globally poor and globally resource constrained. Yet in America, one of the richest countries in the world, when you see places of poverty or more disparities in healthcare and health, you start to wonder, well, that doesn't make sense. And I got thrusted into policy work. Well, suddenly I was meeting with senators. I was flying out and testifying before Congress or doing things like that, but I didn't have formal policy degree experience. So I groomed my sort of replacement to run the operations that I was running in New Orleans. And then I went to get my master's in public health at Harvard through a Commonwealth Fund Policy Health Fellowship. The other thing that happened in New Orleans was I was setting up care delivery models, but the medical students and the residents that stayed in the area and weren't absorbed by other universities or other programs, they didn't have their continuity care clinical sites to train in because everything was destroyed by the hurricane. So then I became the first faculty hire after the storm at Tulane. And then all of my operations became a section. I turned it into a section of global health and community pediatrics. So all of a sudden, I got reintroduced to academia, but I was still doing more operational stuff and not research. But I was a section chief and running some shops, sort of connected to a university. And then so I grew my replacement, went to Harvard. After that 1 year policy fellowship, I realized to really make a difference, I kind of needed to do health services research. And I was suddenly exposed through that policy fellowship that there was more than just bench research and translational research. There was really cool things like social science research, anthropology research in medicine, and health services research, none of which was existing when I was in medical school years before. It was such a perfect environment and said, oh, I am interested in research. I was just more interested in a different type of research that wasn't available when I was going into medical school 10 years earlier. And so that's when I went into a 2 year research fellowship after that policy fellowship at Harvard in health services research. And I combined all of my interests into one and then started faculty as a researcher in 2012.
That sounds like a really cool journey. And then, in understandable terms to a high schooler, could you give me an overview of your research?
Sure. What I'm most interested in understanding and unpacking and solving is how we provide and improve upon access to care for everyone. And then understanding that access is more than insurance eligibility, and insurance eligibility is more than insurance enrollment. Access is more than insurance enrollment. You have to then get uptake of those services. And people can be geographically isolated from the healthcare system at large. They can be linguistically isolated. They can be culturally isolated. They can be financially isolated. Even if they have insurance, they can still be financially isolated with copays and cost sharing. And so there's so many ways that so many people and more people that are historically and contemporarily marginalized and more minoritized groups are isolated from our healthcare system at large. So, how do we improve that for everyone? And then once we bring them into the healthcare system, how do we ensure everyone gets the best care possible, irrespective of their background and culture? So, that is all of my research and how I work on that. And what I try to do is understand that improving the way we deliver care is not about seeing what we can do to optimize the populations that we're serving, especially the minoritized groups we're serving, but rather fix our systems and understand and fix the way providers deliver care so we're doing a better job. So our systems are open to everyone. Because right now, the majority of the way medicine has been designed, and this is my anthropology hat working, is that we have designed our medical systems in the ways in which we've generated our medical knowledge, the way is in which we impart our medical knowledges, and the ways in which we apply our medical knowledge. We've designed that historically with a single cultural perspective. What do I mean by that? The same type of person has built all of these systems in healthcare and generated all the medical knowledge in healthcare historically. And in the US, that has historically been a white man. And so when you design the system with one type of person, it's going to unintentionally benefit those people more than others. So, how do we ensure that all types of people have a seat at the table and are designing our healthcare systems of tomorrow and are designing and generating our medical science and imparting that medical science in medical school and then applying it in the workforce? The more we diversify all of that, and ensure that we are inclusive where they have equal voice. That we're not just diversifying without inclusivity. So, what do I mean by that? Where we're ensuring that diverse individuals have equal opportunities and as their authentic selves to advance in the organization and have a seat at the table. When we get to that realization, then we're going to be able to design equitable systems to address and create what my research is about, which is equal access, but equal uptake and equal care quality for everyone.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then, what's one of the biggest challenges that you faced in research, and how did you overcome it?
I think there's multiple challenges that I face with this type of research. I think oftentimes equity research is underfunded, and the traditional model of the way we fund medical research through the NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, with governmental grants to faculty at universities, it's often set up to fund, research in heart disease or a specific condition. But the kind of research that I do impacts the way we deliver care, and it impacts all conditions. It doesn't nicely fit into one condition. So that's a huge challenge with how we fund the research. So we have to find workarounds, like how does care delivery relate to a specific condition, to then find specific mechanisms to potentially fund that research, to test those things. The other things, we have to not exclusively rely on NIH funding for our research or government funding for the research. We have to think of more creative ways to fund the programs and research that I care about, to change the way we operationalize equity and inclusion within the healthcare system. And so oftentimes, the reason why I funded a center and put it in the health system was to fund the way we operationalize equity and inclusion within the healthcare system, because I knew that needed to be funded, maybe without grant funding, but by the health system in and of itself. So that type of research is funded by the health system. We also look at foundations to fund that work. So funding is a challenge, and we look at creative ways of bridging that. Some of the other challenges I've had with this research is making the case that it's important, that it matters, that it's scientifically sound. Oftentimes there's pushback around the basic things that we're saying around the way that medical science is designed. And when people say that medical science is sort of biased and it's designed to favor one population over another, some people would be like, no, my science is not biased. My science is perfect. People get defensive. People try to defend their science. And you have to be really careful to sort of point out that the medical system is imperfect and we need to fix the system. And so, how you message your research to get buy in from everyone, I think, has been a challenge. And we work on messaging around that. I think the other sort of resistance is sometimes there are ebbs and flows and either interest or resistance at the national stage that drives whether people embrace your research or don't embrace your research. So, during the pandemic, there was a heightened awareness because of, one police killing amongst a segment of the society that didn't somehow know that police killings were occurring always amongst brown and black men and at high rates. And there was racism all around us and oppressed individuals all around us. There was a heightened understanding of that amongst some of us. Some of us knew that existed beforehand, but there was a much larger awareness amongst folks that were privileged in society that this was an issue. And suddenly there was an interest, right? And so there was an interest and there was an influx of money and interest, and all of these things happened. And we had to adjust to that. And then suddenly there was a backlash. And now we're in a period where people are not only not interested, but they're going out of their way to attack it. And so when you do research in this space, then you have to worry about the ebbs and flows of societal acceptance of this kind of research. And you sort of have to adjust continuously to and from of that.
Yeah, that sounds like really challenging. And then which person or mentor in your field has made the biggest impact on you?
Well, I've had many. I think one of the most impactful mentors I've had is Dr. Joan Reed from Harvard Medical School. She runs the Office of Inclusion and Diversity there, and diversity engagement and community engagement programs at Harvard. She's a dean at Harvard. One of the programs that she founded and ran was the program I went to, the Commonwealth Fund Minority Health Policy Fellowship. And that's just one of many programs where she invests in human capital to create an army of researchers and policymakers and academics that are all like-minded, that are often from minoritized groups, but are all unified in their interest in helping minoritized groups improve access, equitable healthcare for them and equitable outcomes for them, and the wellness and health and well-being of minoritized populations. And she's been such a significant mentor. I think others that I've had have been specific research mentors that have really kind of gotten me interested in research and helping me realize how to do health services research when I started early on, and that have been, foundational in my career here.
And then where do you see your research field expanding to, and what are some interesting topics that can be further explored within like the next 10 years?
I think the ways in which our field needs to go is to critically think about the ways in which any type of ism, from racism to sexism to ableism, and all of the different isms, impact the way we generate our medical science, the way we impart our medical science, and the way we apply our medical science. Because until we fix that, we will never solve health inequities and healthcare inequities. To do that, we have to be able to measure those isms, and part of the ways I see the field evolving is fundamentally looking at the ways we can capture structural racism, structural sexism, structural ableism within our healthcare systems and our medical curricula, to be able to capture that and then mitigate the ways in which that manifests. So we can start to undo these challenges that are so intrinsic to the way all of our systems operate, the way our medical systems operate in terms of how they educate individuals, clinician scientists, future clinician educators, future clinician researchers, and future clinicians more generally.
And then how did you find your passion for research? And also, how would you suggest a high schooler try to find their passion for research?
I think the best way to find your passion is just to listen to your gut. What keeps you up at night? What problems do you really care deeply about that keeps you up at night that you wish the world didn't have? What type of methods or what type of schoolwork or what type of homework even you get excited to run home to and do? Like some people just really like math, right? They love just doing math. They think about taking more math classes. I actually was one of those people in undergrad. Or like anthropology, I had such an interest and passion for anthropology after my first anthropology class. And I never knew in undergrad that so much of what I would do later on really related to my anthropology degree. I never knew my interest in math would like come and serve me so much interest later. When I did a lot of health services research, it was mainly around statistics and running large data sets. I never knew my anthropology degree would help me to do qualitative inquiry and do qualitative research. So all of these things sort of, I didn't know that my passions would be related to that. I knew that my passion towards community service, my passions towards like making sure that healthcare was equitable would be something I'd probably lean into later, be it clinically, but later through research. But that came so later. So I think following your passions and seeing where that leads is sort of the best advice I would give.
Okay, so really just exploring your interests.
Yeah. Because if it's not something that keeps you up at night as a problem or keeps you up at night because you just have a joy in doing it, you're not going to want to dedicate your whole research career to it.
Yeah. And then what traits do you think define a great researcher, and what type of traits would you look for in a potential lab member or collaborator?
I think the most important trait that defines a great researcher is to not be dogmatic, to be open-minded, to understand that your inquiry is always influenced by your own blind spots. So to be culturally humble. And by that, I mean to understand that your worldview is shaped by your experiences, your perspectives, and that influences the questions you ask in your medical science and the ways in which you interpret those results. And understand that unless you surround yourself by diversity, inclusivity in the broadest sense of those words, you will never be able to impact your shortcomings when it comes to the blind spots in your research inquiry and the way you interpret your research data. And so, what I always look for is diversity and a diverse set of thoughts. And what I always try to create in my lab is inclusivity so people can be able to thrive and feel supported enough to speak up as their authentic selves, because without inclusivity, you don't get the benefits of diversity you seek in innovation. and a diverse perspectives. Because if people are not allowed to thrive in environments as their authentic selves, they won't speak up to you when you're saying, oh, I think this is just means this. If they really know based on their lived experience that you're interpreting the data pretty myopically, they won't speak up in your lab unless they feel empowered to do so, and they know that their voice and their lived experience is equally valuable, even if they are lower in the totem pole in your lab than you as a PI or a director.
Okay. And then what kind of skills do you think a high schooler could develop, even if they don't have access to a lab or any of the tools that you guys have?
I think people can develop an inquisitive mind. They can learn to use Google Scholar. So when you define your passions, you can ask yourself afterwards, oh, I really care about this problem. What is known about this problem? So to do a preliminary literature search. So you go on Google Scholar and you say, what has been written about the problem I care so deeply about? What is known and what is unknown? And you can start to develop based on what is unknown, what your questions may be. And then you can start to network with other researchers or professors or people or your teachers and start to ask, well, how do I develop a research portfolio based on what is unknown? How do you start to ask questions around what is not yet known about the problem that I care deeply about? So, doing those first few steps, defining problems you care about, understanding what's already been researched in the area that you care about, and then starting to work with others to define ways in which you can add to that field based on potential questions in research areas that could help fill in the gaps for things that are unknown in the problem you care about, I think are early steps that high school students can engage in.
Okay. And then just for a final question, what advice would you give to a high schooler who wants to go into research?
I think it's probably similar to the one of the questions you asked a couple questions ago, which is be open-minded, understand and apply a healthy degree of scrutiny over the research you read. Cultural humility is not merely applying scrutiny over what you bring to the table and what biases you may have, but understanding that, just because it was published in a really important journal by really important people, that somehow it may not also be biased. We generate biased science all the time. So looking to see, oh, who funded this paper? Was it funded by the drug companies, for example? Does it have some biased funding? Does the sample or the population they studied, is it diverse? Are the authors of this paper diverse? These are ways in which you can ask critical questions to see if the science that you're reading, even at this stage, is inclusive. And so, as you're doing that Google Scholar thing that I talked about to understand what's in your field, you can start applying those things to apply a certain degree of healthy scrutiny over what you read.
Okay, so that's all the questions that I have for today, and thank you so much for meeting with me.
Absolutely. It was wonderful meeting with you.